What does it say about college football? Sometimes you have to read the room. Sometimes you have to know the room. And sometimes it's common sense. But what does it say about college football that three iconic programs, at least that I know of, and not always have been the most successful, but that Texas, USC, and Nebraska, and we knew about Nebraska, we know about USC, that's recent, and now Texas, are not going to host spring games. What does it say about college football?
Well, that it is ever-changing and that spring games are antiquated and they need to change it. I mean, if you're and part of it is they're not really money makers anymore, or if they need to make money on it, they need to do something different than a spring game because outside of a couple places in the country, the enthusiasm of your spring game is directly related to how good you were the previous year. Or if there's a new coach. And even then, if there's a new coach, it may not be. So I don't know what the point of them is anymore because it's just kind of outgrown what it was, and I don't think they can make it go backwards. So now they need to adjust to the new realities of college football and kind of just move them on down the way.
Yeah, I just think they don't really matter as much. I think that's the clearest thing is clearly you're not doing them anymore. They don't matter. They used to matter. They are not nearly as much of a priority. There's other ways to, impress recruits. And, I mean, like, because this used to be a thing. Like, Mac Brown used to have their big jamboree. Like, It was a whole thing. And then everybody was doing, like, let's sell out the spring game. And then, whatever other gimmicks, I guess, that were thrown out there during spring. I mean, it was made out to be like an event in some ways, in some places. Nebraska, a great example of that. And I just think the season's gotten longer. The issues have gotten larger in terms of rosters and all the things that you're juggling as a head coach and just as a program in general. And I think there's a couple examples in the article that was written about this. I was quoting Del Conte and Sarkisian, among others, and talking about their reasons as to why they are not going forward. We know Matt Rule talked a little bit about how he's afraid of poaching, players getting poached because they have a big spring game performance and get noticed by somebody. And I think people downplayed that answer from him as not really being like a driving example. Like it's an understandable one, but it's not really the driving force. I think the driving forces, though, are, the money and just where your attention is now. It's not – you don't have to impress recruits with the big spring game anymore. And just offer them money or, show them around at any of the numerous games you're now playing. So it's not as much about, like, look at our facilities. Even though it is, that's not the end-all, be-all because that's all you could use to flash. You used to park a car out in front of the – like we had, Texas like a year ago? Remember when NIL started getting rolling and they'd park the cars like the Ferraris or Lambos or whatever all out front? Like that's – kind of the new era where you can flash stuff, but I just don't think it matters as much the cookie cakes and the trips as much as they used to because there's other things that are enticing. So, yeah.
Overwhelmed by your inbox? Clean Email is here to help. Organize, clean, and manage your emails with powerful automation tools. Say goodbye to spam and clutter and enjoy a stress-free inbox. Try Clean Email today at cleanemail.com. That's CLEAN email.com.
It's just not as much of a pull or as much of a recruiting tool as it used to be, and you're already playing so much football that I think it's one less thing on your plate. So just a lot of reasons as to why, a lot of reasons that add up to make it make sense as to why you would not want to make it as big of a deal anymore.
Yeah, I think, again, those are USC has been more recently down based on their standards, but they have their unbelievable lineage. And Nebraska's been down for almost 2 decades, but they were the king of a spring game. Every once in a while, somebody else would have 80 to 100,000, but they did it for how many could fit inside the stadium. They're changing, and now UT, which is among the top 5 programs in America, have decided not to do one either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation where Texas in particular, we mentioned Matt Rule, he talked about the poaching aspect of it. Although, like I said, that wasn't really like the key probably driving force, but it's a reason. Del Conte, on the other hand, pointed out that Texas played 4 extra games than pretty much everybody else in the entire country.
Yep.
So they played a whole month of an extra season. And so they don't really probably feel the need to, like, let's get back to football right away and get back in the pads. And also, you're losing like 15 guys to the NFL. Your roster's completely in flux. I think everybody's worried about poaching to a certain extent, but they're also just worried about, I think more so than that, of why am I going to put all this effort into spring when some of you guys are just going to leave right after it's over anyways? I think that's the as big of an issue as anything is we pour into you and then you just bolt right before the summertime. So it's like, what are we doing here, you know?
I also, just from a functional standpoint of, you only get, 15 practices, 20 practices
15.
or whatever, 15 practices. Well, now I have to make one of those like an entertainment event. I'd rather just have a practice and call it a day.
Yeah, and if in fact there are always changes that are just constant. We had Jamie Pollard on yesterday. Oh, by the way, Gene Taylor, the AD at Kansas State, is going to be on with us very soon. Tom Homo is going to join us from BYU, outgoing AD in about 15 minutes. You don't even know half the time if it's going to change from week to week, much less semester to semester. So,
well, did you read the article on the spring games?
Yeah.
Del Conte said this is just a year thing. Like, it's not a permanent decision.
And when Chris Kleiman brought that up, I'm like, damn, that makes sense about the OTAs if that ever goes to something like that.
Well, Del Conte said this is not like we're not doing spring games at all anymore. He said this is like they played an extra month. So this year it's not good for them. Sarkisian did say he likes the OTAs, though. So I think there's enough coaches that the spring's not going to go away, but the jamborees and the let's sell out for the 15th consecutive year just to show how badass our fan base is and to impress recruits, like that's a lot less of a priority than it used to be because you can impress them in different ways now. And it, as Matt Rule said, is more of like a fan event as much as anything. And he believes there's different ways to entertain fans nowadays rather than, trying to sell out a spring game. So, yeah, Sark's in favor of OTAs. We've heard other coaches talk about that. I'd imagine that spring will probably turn into some form of OTAs, like if it falls in the month of March and April, or if it, goes along with a new calendar of sorts where it's closer to the season. I think that's the stuff that gets worked out now. But there will be something. It's just not going to be spring. It'll probably be OTAs, for better or worse for college football fans out there who cringe at the idea of becoming more and more like the NFL every day. I think, unfortunately, if you're worried about that, this is another area where they're probably going to start following the lead of the NFL as far as having organized team activities.
Mike Norvell, Florida State, will not have theirs, but they're renovating Doak Campbell Stadium, so that has a lot to do with it, with all the construction and more. But he also said that this seems to be more of what the trend will be. And maybe, unlike a lot of decisions like the transfer portal, NIL, or whatever else, they get football coaches in a meeting. It doesn't matter whether the head coach at North Dakota State or the head coach at Georgia. Get them in a meeting with people who make decisions as well, not just to commissioners. Really, this has nothing to do with commissioners, but ADs and those who are involved in the athletic department and programs. And this is football. And decide what is best. Maybe you get 12 or 15 practices in April or whatever you want to do it based on the regionality, weather, etc., semester timing calendar, and then you still get something during the summer similar to what are off the field or, OTAs, organized team activities.